Yo, what's up everyone? Welcome to another episode, which feels weird to say. It's not really an episode, it's not a show. I don't know, volume, I think this will be 5 of the partnership, AAA Asphalt, True Capacity Fitness and Custom Imports, Project V354 is what I've called it. Any of you who've seen any of the previous videos know what I'm talking about. It's the V35 with the BMW N54 motor that is being built for competition drift. So it's been a big week. Now, unfortunately, it's been a week that I haven't been able to be here at the workshop and very involved. So there hasn't been a lot of, I haven't got a lot of footage or anything to share of, or not much anyway, of the actual process. However, it's been a big week in terms of development and the stages of the build. So I wanted to do, now's a really good time for another video for an update of what's been going on. So the exciting news is in this week, we've had the exhaust manifold made, turbo mounted, and even essentially pretty much the whole exhaust done. So this is a big step in the build. Last video, actually I might have to backtrack slightly. Last video was prior to the engine even being mounted. So let's rewind a sec. Last video was getting the motor in, sitting in and making sure it fit, and there was some shit that we had to do to make it work, as you kind of expect. But we got it in, then mounts have been made. So engine mounts are done. Engine is physically mounted solidly in there. Transmission, gearbox is mounted. So it's officially in and done, bolted in, all of the things clear and work and shit. So I'll show you that at some point, whether I insert some little bits of footage or images or something here of mounting and stuff, but that's done. Next step was then, as I've just mentioned, the more of the fabrication side of things, trying to get that stuff done and run and won and out of the way. So turbo manifold, because that's a bit of a custom sort of a thing that was going to need to be done on this car. That's been exciting, very different. I'm going to show you that and talk about that now. So, as you've seen or as you know from previous videos and anything, if you're people who are into N54s, you know this shit. Similar to J's, they've got hot side on the driver's side of the car, cold side on the passenger. So, in this car, being that it's a Nissan chassis, and as you saw in the previous video, there's not a lot of room compared to, even though these come out with the VQ motor in them and a big V6, the engine bay design and everything isn't as accommodating as I thought it was going to be for this motor, and just the orientation of it all. So as you see, like I said in that previous video, getting it in was a bit of a mission. On that driver's side now, where on the hot side, I thought we were going to be okay in terms of a high front forward sort of mounted turbo, which is essentially what most single turbo conversions on actual Beamers like E92s and all of that, that's sort of what they end up doing. And the turbo ends up sitting quite proud high in front of essentially what is the driver's side strut tower. And I thought that's what we were going to be able to do here. As it turns out, that isn't going to work, because just the layout of the car, to design the strut towers in the 35 are actually a lot further forward than they are in the Beamers, and therefore there isn't actually the room to do that. There's not a lot of room below either, and again I'll try and pop some shots or something in here that you can sort of see. But what it's meant is we've actually had to make all of this work, we've had to think outside the box again, which is kind of the theme of this car, but do something quite different. And we've actually had to shift the turbo onto the other side. which is essentially putting the hot and cold sides on the same side. If people doing single turbos on V8s and V6s and stuff like that, this isn't that weird because the turbo has to go somewhere and it's on one side, therefore you've got runners heading from one side of the motor crossing over to reach turbo on the other side, blah blah blah. Essentially what we've done here, but for us it was purely room and making it work. And again, because of the slant motor in this thing, while it's quite crowded in one spot, which is the sort of the top driver side of the engine bay, it then opens up quite a lot of room on the opposite. So even though the intake manifold and things have to go there was still a lot of space. So we decided to, kind of didn't have a choice, but we've decided to sort of utilize and capitalize on that space and put the turbo there. So it's meant making a manifold from one side to the other in the most efficient way, obviously. But by doing so, like I said, it's giving us way more room and a bit more freedom. Plus, turns out that in terms of weight, between the turbo and all the intake stuff and things like alternators and rah-de-rah, all now being on that passenger side of the engine bay, it's actually evening out the weight distribution in a good way, instead of everything or most of the heavy stuff being on the one side. Sorry about the noise, it's another beautiful day here in Adelaide and it's like 5 degrees and pissing down with rain and wind and all of the things. So it's a little bit noisy, or it might be. Anyway, so I'll show you what we've done because it's essentially done. There's some little bits that still need to be tweaked, and Nick, who's been doing the fab, you know, most of these guys are sort of perfectionists and they want to tidy shit up and blah blah blah, but it's in there, it's done, it's mounted, it's all of the things. So I'll give you guys a look at that now. Right, so on the manifold side of things, turbo manifold, for any of you guys who aren't familiar with the N54s, they're a twin turbo from factory, and what they actually do is the two turbos both run off their own little bank of 3 cylinders, so one turbo for the front 3, one for the back 3, and the exhaust housing of the turbo is part of that bank, that little manifold. So the manifolds and turbos are kind of one, and I'll show you that here, right? So this is a manifold of one of these, which would be this way up, and as you can see, turbo hangs off the bottom. Now, what's going on here? In terms of flow and performance and stuff, those manifolds are actually very capable. Guys run twin upgrades on these things and make bulk power, more than even I'm planning on making with this car. So flow and stuff's not an issue, but due to savings on cost and what I was hoping for ease, what I was always going to do with this car is actually cut the turbo off the 2 factory banks, use those banks then and weld onto them, and essentially only then have to make runners to get from those 2 banks to the turbo, which for the initial placement of where we were going to be mounting the turbo was then going to be super easy. Would have literally been 2 90-degree bends, short bit of pipe to the turbo, to the collector or to the V-band. Really straightforward. Turns out that wasn't the case, plus things have changed along the way, so as it does. So the two banks of 3, cutting off the turbos. Whilst they're not exactly equal, those cast or those factory runners, as you see there, those banks of 3 are pretty close to being even. In my head, I thought if I can just get the point from each one of those to the turbo to be equal length, then that would be pretty close to an equal length manifold. Which again, based on the position we were going to put it, shouldn't have been that hard. Turns out we've had to move it to the whole other side of the motor now, so we've had to do what we can. We're limited with space. Obviously, being right-hand drive, we've got the power steering rack and steering column and other stuff on this side, and it's not It's a Nissan that doesn't have an N54 in it, so it's not designed to have this motor in it, so there's not as much room as we would like. However, we've done the best we can, and we've got them, again, they're not equal at all, but they're not that far off, and I guess we won't know till the car runs, but I'm hoping that it's probably, well, like I said, I'm hoping that it's going to sound pretty fucking cool. But anyway, I'll show you some shit now. So, inserting footage here. What you'll be seeing now is some shots of the turbo, what we've made in terms of the turbo manifold, and it's a tight squeeze, like I said, and like you can see. So we've got the two banks cut off, elbows welded onto them, and then runners that make their way towards the front in slightly different directions and stuff to try and achieve that equal lengthness. A couple of V-bands just for ease of when this needs to come on or off or whatever. It's essentially impossible to do as one whole piece. So we've chucked a V-band in before it goes under the motor, as you can see now, where the two runners then turn into one. Obviously you can see we've taken a slightly different path with them, trying to lengthen one and take the shortest path on the other. Bring them together, then they cross over and go up to where the turbo is mounted. Now the turbo has ended up sitting, as you can see, in a front low mounted kind of position, which we sort of had to do due to intake manifold, piping, and all of the things that also need to happen on this same side now. We want to keep heat away as much as we can. Obviously there'll be shielding and wrapping and all of the things that will go on when it's ready, but we also still need to fit alternator and shit on this side as well. So we didn't really have a choice of anywhere else. If we had to put it up the top, it would have interfered massively with the throttle body, the intake, blah, blah, blah. So we've gone for where we have, which in hindsight is actually pretty cool, and we're all pretty happy with it. So the turbo is mounted. That's where it's going to sit, and the exhaust is done to about 3/4 of the way back the car. We've just got the last little bit to finish off. We had an issue with the welder, and so that's been held up slightly, but that's very exciting. That's a huge piece of the puzzle that's now essentially done. Like I said, manifold's got to come off, got to do some porting and grinding inside and tidying up and all the things. Might get it ceramic coated for obviously heat reasons and shit, but it's on. And as you can see, it's very different. This car, in my mind, right from day one, was always about being a bit different and kind of challenging people to push, you know, not pushing the boundaries. This isn't some like groundbreaking thing, but just thinking outside the box a little bit. But as it's evolving, it's getting even more different and weird and unique than I planned. But it's not a bad thing. It's going to be really different when it's done, but as long as it works, which we're pretty confident it will, it should be really fucking cool. So we're getting there. We're starting to get real close. Now that this is done, there's not that much more. There's I'm going to make a bracket to bolt the alternator on. There's a little bit of fluffing around we've got to do, but the engine essentially is almost ready to be pulled back out again and start to be assembled properly. Get everything on in sort of like a final, done deal before it can be dropped back in, and then it's just wiring it up really. A bit of placement of shit inside, and then bolting the interior together, which is it's all ready to go. It just needs to be chucked in, painting the outside, and yeah, there's not a lot to do. There's not a lot to do. I know it still looks a long way off, but there's not a lot to do. So yeah, super exciting. There is a couple of events coming up within the next couple of months that I'm really hoping this car's going to get out to, so we can start testing it and driving it and get nothing happening. Right, I was just, I am under the car. I was getting a couple of shots of exhaust, manifolds and dumps and all of the things while I'm under here. And while I was under here, I thought actually I should I should run over a quick couple of other things. I wanted with this video channel, fucking whatever, wanted to make sure I'm not just covering all the wins and successes and stuff, but also the issues and the trials and tribulations that have come from a project like this. So in terms of making the engine fit, there were some areas that we had to cut. There were some things that are in there now, and now that it is in and all sorted very close. So I thought I would just quickly show you some of that stuff and some of sort of, I guess, the tolerances and our shit that we're dealing with. So I will flip the camera around. So the transmission in the tunnel actually fits nicely, got plenty of room. That's the mount, obviously that needs to be all tidied up and finalised, so don't hate on it while it's a bit scrappy. There's plenty of room here, all of that was fine. In terms of, so this is where it started to get pretty gnarly. As you can see, this power steering line is going to be something that we're going to need to find a solution for. We think we know what we're going to do and it should be fine, but yeah, there was no other choice in terms of making it work with the sump of the N54 and how that all works. Again, there was, come around this side, this bit of bracing had to be cut just between here and here for the sump to fit and to go in. But now that it's in and we know where it's going, that'll be able to be reattached with another bar and stuff, so that's fine. But again, I just wanted to show you how close all of the things are and how, in some ways, how well it fits. But at this stage, the update is, as you've hopefully seen in some of these clips, pretty big deal. Manifold done, exhaust pretty much done, turbo mounted, all the hot side stuff is sorted. So it's getting really fucking exciting. That's possibly it. You know me, ranting, talking too much. So I will probably leave it there and see you guys in the next video. Hopefully they keep coming out regularly, semi-regularly now. If I think of anything else, I'll film some more or do another one or whatever. You'll see me. Cheers.
Can you fucking, like, can you actually